Hey there, we're back again. Thanks for having us, even though we're imposing ourselves on you. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Andrea.
And we are Relatively Unstable. Remember to like, follow, share, subscribe. We will, out of respect for our conversation today, not force you to do anything, but we will assertively ask you to do those things for us.
Please.
We love you and we hope you're loving us too. Before we introduce the guest that we are so excited about today, we mentioned in our last episode that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And while we have lots of fun and maintain copious levels of inappropriateness on this show, we are also and concerned about real shit. And it really doesn't get much more real than domestic violence. And we hope that you will lean into this today and not shy away, because while it might not be your experience, chances are it's relevant to someone close to you. And now, today, we have Kisa McKinney joining us. And Kisa is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has a practice in Farmington Hills, Michigan. She's experienced in counseling people and families through a broad scope of needs, from individual, family, couples, to abuse and support for LGBTQ+ and transitioning needs. What did I miss, Kisa? Welcome.
Hello, Tiffany. Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
I don't think you missed much. Anybody need more information, they can go to the Whole and Inclusive website.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we will put all that up on the chat. So let's talk domestic violence. That's really strong language. The word violence is strong, but what does it actually look like?
So domestic violence, I guess I would want to emphasize here that it doesn't have to look like what you imagine in the media or what you imagine violence to look like. It takes a lot of forms. So it is a matter of the physical violence that you think of. It is that. It is hitting and choking and kicking and smacking and things like that. Absolutely. But it's also emotional. It's name calling. It's insulting. It's gaslighting. It's a matter of financial abuse, kind of keeping the family finances secret and things like that, not being able to make enough money to feel like an equal partner. It can be spiritual. It can be social, in that it can hold you back from those communities and groups that you're used to being a part of, or that you were once upon a time. It's sexual. Even within the confines of a marriage, there are things such as rape and forced sex behaviors and things like that. So it really is quite the wide variety of behaviors that, on its face, they have to do with power and control.
So Kisa has 2 blog entries on her website, and I was reading, and one of the things that I read in there was that kind of the goal is to gain power. And I imagine that most people maybe don't go into a situation with the goal to be abusive. So how is it that how do we kind of explain, how do we reconcile that that's their end game? Is it more so that they just, like, what is that need that's driving the behavior?
So I think in one of the articles I also mentioned that abusers, if you will, are not necessarily bad people. People who find themselves hurting others, abusing others, manipulating, and doing harm or aggressive things towards another are no different than the rest of us. They simply have bad skills for getting their needs met. We all have a need for some modicum of power and control within our world. It doesn't feel good to be powerless. It doesn't feel good to feel out of control. And when I'm having a difficult time locating internally a sense of power, being creative in order to come up with ways to control my world, then I will, if I guess maybe given the opportunity, or just not being able to be creative and assertive about what it is that I do need and how to get that, and I don't have enough resources, I'll become aggressive. I'll find someone else that I can control, something else that I can control, something that I can wield and exert power over in order to get that need met. It's a basic human need to control one's world in some way, shape, or form, and to feel a degree of power. So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered the full question, Tiffany, but it can be any of us who kind of act badly that way.
I can say that I most certainly can be a controlling person or desire control in certain instances that cause me to, or motivate me to act a certain way that probably is not quite characteristic of who I am. So you also talked about the phases of domestic violence. So the honeymoon stage, and can you talk about that? Because I have a question that's kind of related to that.
Yeah, sure. So think of kind of the domestic violence pattern of behaviors as cyclical within a given relationship. And the cycle will look like concentric circles that start big and get smaller. So what do I mean? So the cycle has three parts to it, right? So kind of that explosion, we know that very well. We know what that looks like. That's when you saw a homegirl out in the parking lot at the Walmart and she was going heads up with dude, and you know, it got out of control. You know what that looks like. Mm-hmm. But there's also two other phases, and one of those, or the one that really follows that explosion phase, is what's called the honeymoon phase. He's sweet, nice, and I don't want to be generalizing here in that all men are abusive and all women are victims. I really don't want to paint that picture.
Yeah.
But if we take this couple maybe sitting out in the Walmart going at it, and we put them in the concept of this cycle, you have the explosion. The honeymoon looks like maybe he's sweet, he's nice, he's apologetic, he's promising never to do that again. Okay, let's go to counseling. Maybe there's makeup sex, and there's all this kind of delicious romance that happens at that time. It starts to feel good to her. She remembers why they got together in the first place, and oh, he's a good person. But then after a little while, you go into the next phase, which is a tension building phase. And she knows this is happening because she's walking on eggshells. She's not quite sure exactly what's going to set him off, but she knows it could be a look, it could be a word, the kids are too loud, somebody made a call, a telemarketer called and she didn't handle it the way that he thought that she should. And then boom, we have the explosion again. When I talk about the concentric circles, this cycle at the beginning of romance, at the beginning of a relationship, the explosions are far and few between. And so they happen, oh gosh, last year that happened, but that was just a one-off. And yeah, it was sweet for a long time. And then we had this buildup and dang, it's back again this year. What ends up happening is this time frame gets smaller and smaller and smaller until the explosions become more frequent, and we dovetail into the honeymoon, it's a shorter period. The tension building is almost always there, and it's almost always the norm. Everybody's just walking on eggshells all the time. And we just never know, but we know it's coming. Boom, the explosion will come. And it just kind of goes too quickly.
And I just want to jump in for a second and ask, like, when you say explosion, does that necessarily mean like physical violence, or does that mean just like a super bad argument or a super bad, or like a breakup, or like, I mean, can the explosion be something else than an actual physical altercation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it can be an emotional type of experience where there's, conflict that's just kind of too big to manage, or everybody's on edge and nobody has an answer. And so then, there may be a threat to whoever is the victim partner, that, what, next time, don't do that anymore, because if you try that, then what? I'm going to leave. We're not going to be together. I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to, I'm going to call your mom. I'm going to say blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tell the pastor. I'm going to, whatever it is, that explosion's outcome generally has a violent tinge to it. And when you think of violence, I really want you to think of anything that hems you up. It can be physical, but it could just be a threat to the well-being of your kids. It could be a threat to the well-being of your job security. It could be some sort of coercion. It can be some sort of kind of gaslighting that just makes you kind of like question, was it me? Did I do? Okay. So anything that kind of puts the victim partner on that footing all of the time in that cycle. Remember, we're not talking about a one-off where you and, your dude are having an argument and it went badly. Those things happen. We're talking about a consistent pattern of behavior within this couple.
Mm-hmm. You think, so in your experience, so in this scenario that we're talking about a man-woman couple.
Sure.
Is it harder to recognize in same-sex couples simply because we're so programmed to think of domestic abuse between a man and a woman, and I think the stat was 85% of the victims are women? Is that a more vulnerable population because of that, do you think?
Not necessarily. So 85% of women are reporting. Okay. So it doesn't mean that is all of the intimate partner violence that's happening. Those are the reports that we get. Commonly, it is women who are on the victim side of this relationship. However, no, same-sex partners are not exempt from this type of behavior. Again, remember, any of us can be in the position where we are treating another person badly because we need to grab some degree of power and control in our world. We need to feel like we have enough resources to take care of ourselves and maybe our household. Anytime those things feel questionable, tentative, we could easily be in that category without the right coping skills, without good anger management skills, without good professional resources, without good home training. Just honestly, it really could be any of us, right? And so whether it's two women, two men, two non-binary people, a trans person, it doesn't matter. It's a human issue. And so we know who's reporting more in the United States, but we don't necessarily have good, reliable stats and information because we're not accounting for, say, trans men who were assigned female at birth and now perhaps in a relationship with another non-binary or queer person. how would even the United States categorize? We're not doing that very well. How do they categorize that individual and then account for that report?
And so I think you actually answered that question in that, like, that's kind of what I was getting at. Are these people being missed?
Yeah, I would say that we're probably missing large swaths of folks, right? Because our eyes are kind of tuned to see, like I said, a homegirl and dude in the Walmart parking lot. Okay, so we identify that. But if you saw two women in a similar situation, would you know that that was domestic violence? Would you know that that was an intimate partner relationship that was experiencing this level of conflict? You might not call it that.
No, they would end up on World Star.
Lord.
and then also, like, I would imagine, I mean, obviously what probably was getting reported is the physical aspect of violence, but I mean, I can imagine that there's a lot of women and probably a lot of men also that when they watch this or listen to this, and when you talked about the cycles, are realizing that they probably were in a emotional, violent situation and are literally just now realizing it, and so even though it didn't escalate to physical where it could be reported for like a police report or something like that, but that number is probably like crazy higher if you account for like the emotional.
If you were really to account for all of the versions, all of the iterations of violence, and my clients will recognize that I call many things violence, especially when it comes to language. Language can be violent. If I say, Andrea, if you don't do XYZ for me, then just forget it. Don't call me anymore. I just hemmed you up and decided that our relationship was completely hinged on whether or not you do X, Y, or Z. I've not accounted for free will. I've not accounted for your needs. I've simply made a demand and an ultimatum. And if you don't come through for me, then bang, it's done. That is emotional. It is abusive. It's intolerable. It's unsustainable in a relationship. Imagine that level of communication ongoing throughout your romantic or your intimate partner relationship. Also, I want you to think about, I used to do therapy for families within the dependency court system in California. And one of the things that is most difficult to report, get traction and movement on, is an emotional situation that you see playing out that is harmful, say, to a child. It's really, really hard to document because you don't have physical bruises. You don't have necessarily things. And a lot of times, children, victim partners, we can cover it up when we go out and about. We'll lie to make sure that, it doesn't get worse, or you don't come in and break up my family and yada, yada, yada. So it's really hard to report and prove and prosecute and intervene with some of the emotional situations. And sometimes it takes a therapist or a clinician to be able to see, oh, wait a minute, this is a pattern. And that center of control lies with this partner. And this partner is constantly gaslit or humiliated or insulted or demeaned or belittled or just not given voice.
Can you, we hear the term gaslighting a lot right now. It's all over, can you define and give us some examples of what that is?
I can try. Gaslighting is so frustrating. You know it when it's happening to you. You know that you saw X, Y, or Z. You heard them say this, that, or the other thing. You read that report somewhere. And yet what you're getting back in the feedback loop from the partner that you're talking to, or the whoever is the person that you're engaging with, is that that's not true. That didn't happen. No, you didn't hear that correctly. That's not what was meant. And like I said, it's not a one-off thing where two people just kind of have a difference of opinion or a disagreement. That's not what that is. It's a matter of perpetually kind of being told that your thoughts, your feelings, they really don't count. They need to be discounted because they can't be trusted. A lot of times today we'll kind of in the political sense, we'll hear someone say something, literally say something like, don't believe what you see or hear in the news. That's fake news. Well, wait a minute, then I'm confused. What is the real news? I can't trust my eyes. I can't trust my ears. So now I'm constantly doubting what it is or whatever information is coming in. It makes me on edge and I don't know where to put that information. I don't know how to integrate it into my life.
And it's probably, and people who do gaslight, and I'm assuming that we all do it to some extent, you know, on a range or whatever at some point, but people that perpetually do it, it's almost like a grooming, I would think, like, because now you have this person and you're gaslighting them completely, you know, after every argument or every event or every whatever it is. So now they're already like you don't have to do much work because they're already functioning at half capacity mentally. Like they're already like, wait a minute, I don't understand.
Yes.
You know,
Andrea today.
and so they're already like, okay, I'm already not there. And so the person in power is already like, okay, well, I got you now. Like,
Yes.
like I broke you down enough so that you'll believe what I say and won't believe what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, whatever. And then that just kind of like starts the cycle again. So that starts the detention mode, and then, you know, or starts the expulsion mode. And then when that person feels, when the power person feels like they have it enough, then it's the honeymoon phase. I've kind of been in that. So I'm piecing it together in my mind. So
yeah, you're doing a great job of piecing it together, Andrea. I mean, really and truly, one of the major effects of domestic violence in general, but especially that emotional type or that psychological type of violence or abuse, is that the victim partner is constantly then self-doubting. I can't trust my voice. I can't trust my thoughts. And so there becomes a psychological dependency on what the person of power, what the abuser will allow to be explored, integrated, thought, entertained for the purpose of the family or the couple or whatever. There will be this weird checking in. You'll see victims say something, but then look over to their partner to make sure, you know, did I get that right? Am I in the right? Again, there's part of that anxiety, that walking on eggshells constantly, where that relationship is just a constant tension because I'm not really sure that I can even articulate what needs to be said or what I'm feeling. I can't express that fully because I'm not really sure about it anymore. It's kind of the long-term effect on that.
Kisa, we're in a unprecedented time. If I hear that term again, I might lose it, but it is weird right now. And a lot of people have been quarantined with their abuser for how many months now? Seven. Have you, whether in your personal practice or among your colleagues, seen an uptick in people coming to you either with discovery or can't take it anymore? Or have you noticed any shift in what numbers are looking like in the last 7 months? Is there any data on that yet?
Yeah, there actually is. There was early data that was sussed out by Vox, and actually on our blog, there's going to be a third installation for the domestic violence series that'll drop either today or tomorrow. And I'm talking specifically in that piece about COVID-19, quarantining, and having to have be at home within this type of a relationship, right? And so people who watch these numbers, according to this Vox article, were expecting an uptick in intimate partner violence. I think the number is something like 196 million Americans were issued this stay-at-home order in March. And that looked early on like something like 21 states, 37 counties, 16 cities. And ever since March, almost every state in the union has had some form of a stay-at-home order. When you pair that with the massive amounts of reported domestic violence that we get, you are headed into an intersection that's just a powder keg waiting to explode. So we're waiting to see what numbers will look like, but there is a high expectation that there will be a significant uptick. Part of it has to do with the fact that you can't move around the globe the way you could. People cannot find respite and escape. Even if you think of, and I know we're calling these people abusers, but if you think about that individual, just being able to resourcefully and creatively decide, I'm gonna go take a walk. I'm gonna go drive to the lake. I'm gonna go to the office right now, honey. I'm gonna work late in this place or that place. There's a lot of limitation on what that looks like right now. And so just not being able to get away from one another is a serious problem. And in my practice, and I've seen a report of couples that were not initially assessed as violent. I have seen an increase in bad behavior where just those amount of internal resources are really kind of declining, and people need some extra supports in order to deal with all of what we are dealing with from the impact of the pandemic.
Yeah. How do you, in your practice, if a couple comes to you, because I think about, as I'm reading this stuff, like, what the difference is between a couple where maybe they're just, the chemistry is off, or they just are, just don't get along very well, or, versus an abusive situation. Like, how do you kind of determine what that is when a couple comes to you, whether it's just a couple that doesn't get along and probably shouldn't be together, versus a couple that, so they're constantly fighting and whatever, versus a couple where there's an abusive situation, or whether, or a parent-child, or whatever it is?
So remember, and this will just be the thread that we continue to kind of wrap through our conversation. When we're looking at an unequal distribution of power and control, and an impairment that comes about because of that to the person who has none or very little power and control, now we're looking at something that is abusive or potentially abusive. Also, when there's a pattern of this, not a one-time situation, not even a one-time situation where it got violent. That's not necessarily a domestic violence relationship, and a relationship filled with intimate partner violence. One time, 10 years ago, I lost my shit and I hauled off and I behaved horribly, and I regret that, and I take full responsibility, and I will never do that, and I never have again. In fact, I sought help. That's not a domestic violence relationship. That's something else. But when that pattern is there, that cycle is there, and we keep winding through that cycle, and those circles keep getting smaller and smaller, those events of explosion keep happening, whether they're physical or emotional or something else, then we know we are looking at an abusive relationship, something that would go into that category.
Yeah.
I will say also, with that situation, that couple should not seek therapy as a unit. That is not a good idea. The problem with that is that because that center of power and control rest unequally and unevenly with that one partner, when they present in that clinical space, that person will control that space to make sure that their points are made, they are positively reinforced for what they're doing, that they are the ones doing it right, and that the partner is obviously doing it wrong and responsible for these explosions and for all this stuff that's happening. It's a very savvy, kind of beautiful mind moment, but and a mind fuck moment actually, because it's really hard to sit there and stomach this person who's abusing you present so beautifully and put everything off on you. That's a real hard thing to deal with. And if that's what therapy starts as and continues as, that is a lot more damage to that victim partner.
And so I would think that, just like no one, few people probably go into a situation expecting to be the abuser or the violent partner, if you will. Even fewer people go into a situation expecting to be the victim or the person that is abused. So how do strong people find themselves in these situations?
Yeah, you're kind of leading into the discussion of, why doesn't someone just leave? Lives get entangled really quickly sometimes. And before you know it, you are in love and in home and in child and in all kinds of other situations with this other person. And the stakes become higher. There's more to lose than there was just a bit ago. And so in those situations, it's just not going to be that easy to say, well, I'm a strong person. I'm just gonna, dip out of this. Again, you have community that you're tied to, and sometimes mutually tied to, sometimes tied to because of that other person. They're the ones with the key to the community. They're the ones who let you in. They're the ones who introduced you to this best friend that you have now. Whose side is he going to take if I tell him, your boy is not, he's not wrapped too tight. He's not treating you well. He's not, what you think he is. That becomes a hard sell. Also in, say, families. I mean, have you been in a situation where it was hard to break up with someone because I just love their mom, or oh my gosh, what is cousin so-and-so gonna think? Or there's family pressure sometimes that's like, oh, you guys are so, hashtag relationship goals and whatnot, because you're presenting some way on the outside. And so there's expectation, these pressures to stay together and to work it out. And after a while, this kind of stuff snowballs. You've got children, you've got monies that are mixed, you've got communities that are mutual, you've got families now that are connected and mixed. It's not easy to just step outside of that.
Yeah.
Strong or not strong.
Yeah, and I imagine that the priorities shift and move and where they find their strength at one point or time, they have to save their strength for different.
I've got to save my strength for functioning. I've got to go to work every day.
Right. So if, it's not about, the question isn't why, we talked about what keeps people from leaving, but what, or is there maybe any data on what the average length of time that people stay in these relationships are, like how, or from the point of acknowledgement to the point of exit? What is it that, or how long are people in these relationships? Are there more lifelong situations like this, or because of resources and now that everybody's in therapy, are people just becoming more empowered to leave these relationships sooner, or is it still kind of, it's just everybody's timetable is different still?
I think it's the latter, Tiffany, that everyone's timetable is different. If I were to give you information, it would be purely anecdotal. I have not seen numbers and that doesn't mean that they're not out there, just I'm not aware of numbers that document, on average, how many years a person stays in a relationship before, they exit something that is volatile or abusive. I've had situations where, a young woman as a kind of older adolescent, young adult, she was hit one time. She exited right away. She had the support of her family, her parents. She had friends. So a lot of times it's going to be about what we call protective factors or supports around a person that will enable them to be able to leave something that they know is harmful to them, because we know when something is hurting us. I've also recently heard a story. It was a great aunt of someone, 80 years old. She was murdered by her husband, and they had been together forever. And it had been volatile the entire time. So the range is what it is. It is per human. It is also per level of support. If an individual has folks looking out for them, folks they can trust, people who will believe them, and then support and help, that is a lot easier to come out of a bad situation than if it feels like I don't really have any other choices here. I'm dependent on this person. Then we're not going to leave.
And that last story about the 80-year-old is a lot. Mm-hmm. I don't even know the details, but that is a lot to kind of just take in for a second. Yeah. But that reminds me of, it actually reminds me of a Different World episode where, I don't know how familiar you are with A Different World, but it's one of my favorite shows, so I can quote it like this. Anyway, so Gina, she was one of the newer cast members. She was in a relationship.
Gina DeVoe.
Yes, and she was with, I can't remember the guy, but a rapper. He was trying to be a rapper.
It started with a D. Was it Darius?
Yeah, something like that. And people kind of knew that she was in this relationship and that he was abusive. And Mr. Gaines, wise old Mr. Gaines, was telling the story about his cousin or aunt or somebody. And, he said, yeah, and, he loved her to death and we buried her last year. And that story kind of made me think about that. And then it made me think about how many people feel like love can't be love unless someone gets to the level of explosion. And I'm not sure that you love me if you don't really get super angry or violent or whatever about something I did wrong or something you think I did wrong. And how do people get to that? What's the psychology or explanation about how people think that that's the only form of, or that's one form of love, or because I can remember, definitely not to a physical aspect, but I remember a guy that I dated saying something like that to me, well, you don't really get upset, so I don't know that you love me, or I don't know that you, and I'm like, what? And a lot of people also say if you're a relatively calm person, it's kind of Yeah, like you don't care. And it's
I
kind of like
get jealous.
yeah, like it's kind of like a joke, like, oh, if I was a super naggy bitch, then I'd be married or I'd be in a relationship because that's what men must like because, you know, and so like how do
Once
like
again, we're calling out somebody who's related to me that's a boy.
so like how do we get there and like how like what's the psychology behind that?
Wait, can I
So,
add on to that? Because I think you can answer this all in one. And that is, that was just kind of addressing kind of the culture of don't leave him because you got a man, at least he doesn't hit you. Because I have been told that by an older relative when I was much younger, like, you got a man, why are you complaining?
yeah.
I think that all kind of bundles in there.
So, yeah, I have a few thoughts. One, I could not sleep on A Different World. It got me through college. That's while we were in college, every Thursday night.
Right.
Made room for that. It was our break. And yeah, wise old Mr. Gaines. So I think Tiffany, you're presenting part of the answer to Andrea's question. You talked about an older maybe relative who says to you, you know, hey, at least you know you're not getting hit, you know, whatever. That's a good man. Don't come out of that. So how do we get to the point where that's the definition of love? Either at least you're not getting your ass beat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or if you're not blowing up, if you're not all dysregulated emotionally, then you must not care about me. You must not love me. All of this has to do with messages that we received coming up, I believe. And there are theories that will back me up, that the models that we saw of love in our childhood from our parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, family, friends who we watched be together in relationship, that's what we have to go on. That becomes the default for us. Unless we reset that default, that's what we're naturally going to be inclined to. Tiffany, I also think that you may be touching on an aspect of being Black in America, in that when resources are so sparse and communities and individuals have to be interdependent, and that when women especially have very little voice without the backing or the voice of a man, then that makes a lot of sense that no, you're not going to just poo-poo on or relinquish your key to the kingdom. If this guy gets you access, if this guy gets you resources, and he is not physically harming you, what sense does that make? How are you helping yourself or your family? By exiting that relationship, you will be back at square zero, right? So, and albeit that could be an old way of thinking, we tend to be more resourceful as a people now. We've made great strides. We're educated, many of us, and we've got more resources. Some of us have big ass houses and beautiful cars, and kids go to college. And so we may not have those same types of ways of thinking or inclinations, but it doesn't diminish the fact that that grandma, that auntie, was who you came up under and where you got your messaging about what love will look like.
And so even if you recognize it, it still is just kind of in you.
You would have to make moves, psychological moves, emotional moves, physical behaviors to reset the default. I don't want to be in a relationship for relationship's sake. I don't have to do that now. It would almost be okay if I were by myself until the right person came along. That is a way out there way of thinking for some people. And yet that would have to be perhaps a new default setting that I'm okay as I am, even without a partner sometimes.
And so I'll have to make sure that the next time we ladies get together that I wear my Different World t-shirt.
Right.
I'd like one of those, please.
Too. What signs, so given that, that is still part of our culture, and what signs should we be looking for I'll make the two-part question. What signs should we be looking for with our friends and loved ones who seem okay, who seem relationship goals? When we're at the cookout, what are we looking for when it's just a sunny summer day and we're all having a good time? What would make our feelers go up? And then if it's an emotional relationship or an emotionally violent relationship versus a physically violent relationship, because I would say in a physically violent relationship, you call the police when you get hurt or when you get hit, or, in an emotionally violent relationship, what do you do? If like you said, it's hard to report, it's hard to prove, you can't call the police. So what advice would you give to people who love someone else, meaning, it's your girlfriend, it's your sister, it's your coworker, it's your brother, it's, your mother. And then when do you, and how do you report some of those things?
Yeah. So, gosh, really, really good question, Tiffany. So let's start with some things to look for. If we could list a few things to look for. Remember, you're going to look for that power differential, kind of that uneven, unequal way of kind of being, that deference that doesn't seem like it needs to be there, but not only that, because that could be working for me in my relationship. That's just kind of the way I am. Me and my partner, hey, she wants me to do X, Y, or Z, or he wants me to do blah, blah, blah. And I am good with that. I like doing that for him or for her. Fine. But where the power differential is there and you see impairment, I'm not functioning well. I doubt everything that I tend to say about myself. I second guess who I am, what I think, what I feel. Then, that may be space or reason for coming alongside and loving that person in a different way than just, kikiing it up, girl, girl, girl. It may be a matter of, can I holler at you? How are you for real? Tell me, I heard you said X, Y, or Z. What's that about? Because I think you have excellent thoughts. I think that your feelings are valid. Tell me where you're even hearing that you shouldn't even believe yourself. So there's room for conversation, for dialogue, to see if you can get a bit more information. And even if you can't, you still would want to come closer to that person. I mean, we just would anyway, if that was someone that we valued. If it was discovered, though, that, it's coming out of my relationship and this impairment that you see as a result of that, you might want to be one of those protective factors. Remember, I can get out of it if I feel like I've got some resources, if I feel like I've got support. So, becoming one of those people, someone who you can say, girl, if it ever gets to the point where you just got to go, text me the Honduran flag. I'll know. I will know. That's the signal. And I'm about to move.
Shit. Get your bags.
Right. Get it together. I'm on the corner of such and such.
Exactly. And if you do discover, or if this is you yourself, and I guess I'm speaking for listeners, right, that you are in a situation, or someone who's in a really significant or severe situation of abuse, you want to come up with an escape plan. Mm-hmm. If you've got that person who has your back, put some money someplace else that you can get access to. Put your keys someplace else where you can find them on the quick. have your kids, kind of at the ready where you can grab them and somebody's going to be able to take care of them and protect them. Put some stuff in a bag and keep it in the trunk of your car or in a locker at the store and lock, or whatever you need to do. But there's got to be an escape plan, because like I said, to be 80 years old and to find yourself in a situation where your spouse is now pointing a gun at you, or anybody in a situation that gets that severe, you need to be able to get out of that. And sometimes the police are not necessarily going to be there in time, able to help, take the report without it being something, other than what you intended. So just, an escape plan, being a supportive person, watching for the power differentials, seeing if there's impairment there, and know what your local resources are. There's a national domestic violence hotline. There are local domestic violence hotlines in every city. There is a matter of, texting the domestic violence hotline, Love Is. That's what you text. You text Love Is to the domestic violence hotline. I hope you guys will put that on your...
We absolutely will. We absolutely will.
So that people can, just quickly be able to access resources.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Andrea.
I just want to say that I think it's important that we highlighted the cycle, and like I keep going back to that, but because I know that I talk to my girlfriends, and so like also like even if it's not a physical situation, but if you are on the listening end and your girlfriend is always saying, yeah, well, we're back together again and everything is good, but in 3 months, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, so those can also be words that even if it's not a physical thing, if it's an emotional thing or financial or however the abuse is rearing its head, like those triggers too, because you might
he's acting good now.
Yeah, he's acting good now, or we on the up and up this time, because I wonder, like, why was I able to say that for so long, for 6 years, and somebody didn't be like, girl, hello, did you
see the meme, the Cardi B meme, where it's like, me and Offset are the reason why I don't get involved with my girlfriend's relationship?
But it's true. And
it's true. You get exhausted as the friend.
Yeah, and there's definitely a whole thing of like, there's two sides. Like some people are going to be like, well, I'm going to say the same advice to you every time you bring me the same problem, and I'm going to just keep saying it, and maybe one day it'll stick. Then some people are like, I'm going to tell you one time, and then after that, I want to see change behavior. I don't know which one is right or whatever, but I guess certain situations call for both or either one. But yeah, like, so even knowing what the cycle is, to know that when you hear these things, even on an emotional level, like that's also a trigger. And you can say like, okay, this is like the 7th time this has happened. So I'm not saying you got to leave them, but I'm just saying, like, let's really talk about why, he tells you this and then treats you to something very extravagant and then comes back down. And then why does that happen all the time? Let's talk about that. So
what are your priorities?
Yeah.
Andrea is preaching today because
she's on fire.
She is. She's on fire. That is it.
One last question, I think, because I want to be respectful of Kisa's time. But as we're talking about this, and we're talking about recognizing the victim, one of the other things that we often see in memes and around the internet, and even in life, and I am the mother of boys, one young man, and I try to be realistic about who my son is, but often culturally, the inclination is to, my baby wouldn't do that, or can't say nothing bad about my baby. She's trash. She's using him. He's working so hard. What would you say to people who, or to any of us, about how to kind of look out for behaviors in the people you love or among the people you love and care about and treat you well, but might not be treating someone else so well? And how do you call them out? Or how do you say you can still love that person and call them out on their bad behavior, or be an ally to the person that they're hurting?
Yeah. We see this sometimes with folks who, let's see, how can I make this analogy? Take someone who's been deployed overseas, comes back, military, maybe some PTSD. And so you love this person, but PTSD has a way of really kind of hijacking a lot of behaviors, a lot of thoughts about self, about the world, about others. And so then you not only see clinical symptoms, but you also will see bad behavior, right? And so we tell families all of the time, we want to learn through, we want to resource, we want to equip where we see symptoms. But there's never a reason to be accepting of bad behavior. You always get to call out bad behavior. And so in this particular situation where, maybe it's my son who is, sister girl's reporting, well, your son, he's such and such and such and such. And I want to clutch my pearls and gasp at that.
I didn't like her that much in the first place.
Right. If it was a person just kind of out on the street who complained that XYZ person hurt them, you would be inclined to believe them. You would be inclined to get curious and to ask more questions. And again, it doesn't have to be the end all that, oh, well, now I've got to do this or I've got to act that way. It's a matter of now let's have a conversation. Let's open up a dialogue. Let's ask more questions. Let me talk to my son. If you're doing your thing as a parent, you're going to
in the middle of their mess. That's their relationship. That's between that man and that woman, or those two people.
And it very well could be, until someone is being hurt on your watch. And then you've got kind of a moral dilemma to deal with. Are you going to be accepting of that no matter the source? Or are you going to intervene? And that's a personal choice.
And so I do have one last question. Andrea, did you have anything?
I have something that is probably going to start a whole nother conversation. But maybe
Kisa will come back.
But I kind of just wanted to introduce what is the Venn diagram of narcissists and abusers? And because I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are narcissists that are abusers, and that's all, because that's just what I think. But yeah, that can definitely be a whole nother podcast on narcissists.
Quick response. Yes. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
That you can't easily walk around the world narcissistically and not use and abuse people. It's just, it doesn't work any other way.
Mm-hmm. And there it is.
And so then,
but not every abuser is necessarily a narcissist, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important point, just because much like gaslighting is one of those words right now, narcissist is one of those buzzwords right now, and
exactly.
Everyone knows or is a narcissist, according to the internet.
Exactly.
According to social media. So my last question for you, Kisa, other than will you come back, is, can the abuser heal? And what does life look like? And you know what? Oh, I'm a liar. Because we actually had a question come in to our DM, and that was, what is life like post-survival for the victim? And so with that, I want to ask, can the abuser heal?
Okay.
And,
so let's take your DM question first, as far as surviving, getting on the other side of such a relationship. And again, that quick answer is yes. But it does entail probably either some professional help and or that protective kind of insulation of people around that individual to give messages of safety, to put blame and fault where it belongs and not within the victim, so that he or she learns to trust themselves again. And, you know, many survivors of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, they do present in our practices with the diagnoses of post-traumatic stress syndrome, because over time that pattern has the same type of debilitating impact that we see with others who have been in situations where safety was on the line or responsibility was blurred. And so safety and responsibility. Am I safe now? Yes. Was that my fault? No. When a victim can wrap their minds around those two things, those two concepts, when they keep getting evidence daily and over time that the answer is yes, I am safe. No, that was not my responsibility. No, I am not to blame for that. Then you start to see healing. You start to see this person reemerge strong, vibrant, and actualized. For the abuser, again, yes, absolutely. What does the abuser not have? Remember, very little resources, poor coping skills, poor anger management techniques and skills. That body and emotional sense are completely dysregulated more often than not. Well, these are things that everyday folks present for in our practices, right? To learn how to manage their emotions. What do I do with my anger? What are some of the other resources either outside of myself or within myself? How do I get creative about solving my problems? So once a person is able to do that, then yeah, they too, as an abuser, can come out on the other side and be a healthy, vibrant person. I will say this, though, about folks who find themselves in the role of hurting another person. One of the things that is really key to really being able to come out on the other side is to take responsibility for the behavior. And again, this has to do with, you know, owning the aggression, owning the anger and the damage that was done. And that can be hard. That can be really, really hard. And it can also be one of those reasons that I perpetually avoid getting help, because I don't want to do that. And so now I continue to act badly and blame others for it.
that's deep, yo.
Mm-hmm. Mic drop.
We'll have to have a conversation about narcissism, a conversation about accountability, a conversation about healing, a conversation about PTSD. Professor McKinney. Kisa, thank you for popping in with us. Let our listeners know where they can find you.
So you can find me at our office's website, which is wholeandinclusivecounseling.com. Just all those words, wholeandinclusivecounseling.com. And our practice, I think, Tiffany, at the top of the segment, you said our practice was in Farmington Hills. It was. We are now in Bingham Farms, Michigan. Which is still just not very far over on Telegraph Road. We are doing all kinds of telehealth and remote work right now, just as many providers and clinicians are. And what else? We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Of course, I'm not that savvy when it comes to those things, so I have someone who's helping to do that for me. Shout out to Kiani, thank you. But I think we're on Instagram at Whole Counsel and Facebook at Whole and Inclusive Counseling. So
actually, we follow you, and I believe it is WAIC.
I love that. I love it. No, and I don't.
Can I just say that as a therapist, you have a really calming and beautiful voice.
For
Like
sure.
I can
Right?
understand. I mean, on top of the knowledge and the schooling and all of that, but like just your speaking voice, just automatically, just I feel like it would just make anybody just be like, okay, I can do it. I can, like I can get better. I can work through this.
Thank you.
Very, very calm,
I
beautiful voice.
concur. I concur. So, Kisa, thank you for coming and being the voice of calm in our loud podcast. And make sure you check out, absolutely. Make sure you check out wholeandinclusivecounseling.com. Check for her Facebook, her Instagram. Read her blog, quite interesting. I have it here. I have highlights and all kind of stuff. And check us out next time. Kisa, thank you so much. And be safe. Everyone be safe. Know yourself, learn yourself, your surroundings, build a community that's your own, and create safe spaces for other people.
Absolutely.
Y'all.